You know, we are honored, well, really quite honored, to be in the presence, at least telephonically, of the great one. Mark Levin is on the line now to talk about the IRS scandal that is developing. He's been at the very forefront of bringing this issue to the public's attention. Mark, how are you?
I'm great. Brian and Tori, how are you?
Good, thanks.
All right, so you, in addition to being a syndicated radio host, loved and admired and listened to by millions.
And hated by others, yes.
Well, that goes with the territory, doesn't it? You are also the president of the Landmark Legal Foundation, and you've been working on this issue for some time. Give me the latest on this and the revelations that came out Friday that, yes, indeed, the IRS had been scrutinizing Tea Party-related organizations.
Well, let me give you a thumbnail sketch of this, a little behind the scenes. I haven't really talked about this. We were contacted by Professor Glenn Reynolds, who runs a website, a great, well-known website called Instapundit. And he said, look, we're getting word that the Tea Party's being targeted by the IRS, and nobody seems to be paying attention to this. And there's one fellow in particular who would like to talk to somebody, but he doesn't want his name known because people were scared, believe it or not. So I had our general counsel interview the guy, and he was absolutely legitimate, and he provided us with the forms that were being sent around, which were absolutely outrageous and really unbelievable. And so we decided there's so many groups here, we would ask a couple of the other legal groups that help represent them. But I also decided that representing them individually wasn't going to really do anything. It might help one group or another, but they were trying to pick off these groups. So we decided to go to the Treasury Department Inspector General for Tax Administration. You know, I used to work at the Justice Department, the
Right.
tax divisions at the Justice Department, and that's where you should go for help to oversee the IRS tax-exempt division. And we're talking about tax-exempt groups. I'm not going to get into the weeds, the different tax-exempt groups. And we sent all the information we had in the form of a complaint, a letter. And shortly thereafter, I got a call, and we arranged for two. There were law enforcement agents with the Inspector General's office. They interviewed me. One report has it wrong that they were investigating me and they were armed. They were armed, by the way, and I joked about that. I said, what do you guys need guns for? But anyway, it was a very thorough interview. We provided them with information and leads, and that's the last we heard of it. And obviously this thing is growing. But I want to say something, Brian and Tori, that troubles me a great deal.
Okay.
Congress had much of the same information that I received. Congress held hearings, and then at a couple of the hearings, they asked a couple questions, and they fired off a couple letters, and they dropped it. Congress has subpoena power. Congress has the power to bring witnesses before it and put them under oath, under penalty of perjury. Congress should have gotten to the bottom of this. They shouldn't have left it to the Treasury Department. We have a separation of powers issue. They have oversight power. They have investigative power. Scores of individuals and groups were complaining about this, and I'm just going to tell you, my heartfelt opinion is, whether it's Republicans in the House or people in the Senate, they largely dismissed this. They beat their chest a little bit, they did their fan dance, and they moved on. Congress is way too timid. When you have people coming forward and saying the IRS is abusing us and we have evidence, don't blow off the Tea Party like it's a bunch of kooks. They're not a bunch of kooks. They're a bunch of citizens trying to do the right thing.
You know, they always say, the Tea Party is just a bunch of paranoid gun freaks. Well, the old saying is, it's not really paranoia if indeed there are people out to get you.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know, we have committees on Congress that could have held serious hearings. They didn't call any witnesses. I mean, the IRS commissioner, that's fine. In the course of a different interview, he's asked about it, but they didn't follow up on any of this stuff in the hearing process and the investigative process. As I say, they fired off a couple letters and said, hey, look into this and let us know about it. And in addition to that, I look at that, and then I look at Benghazi. Information's coming out slowly. We don't have a select committee to really get to the bottom of this, and the Speaker of the House is very timid about this. They really have to put the brass knuckles on now. We're seeing more and more abuse by the bureaucracy, by this administration, and they need to take an active role.
Well, Mark, I think largely because of your work, there are quite a few people up there on the Hill mostly Republicans, but also some Democrats who are energized, and I think they will. But tell us your sense of this, and you do truly understand what's going on. How pervasive a problem might this be within the IRS? Is it a couple of relatively low or mid-level bureaucrats who have been doing this, or is this a broader policy directive that led them to do this and possibly others?
I could be wrong. I just cannot believe that a couple of revenue agents in Cincinnati came up with this idea.
I agree.
And sent it into 4 or 5 different states, targeting 75 organizations. And furthermore, from the leaks about the report that's obviously been delivered to a few committees from the Treasury Department, we also know that a few senior people knew a hell of a lot more about it than they had let on in the past. And Congress will now, hopefully, at least try to get to the bottom of it. But you know, I'm only raising this story this way because if these 2 Treasury Department agents and others at Treasury hadn't really done their jobs, this wouldn't be known other than us complaining about it and Tea Party activists complaining about it. I mean, Congress has got to get more assertive in controlling what's going on in the executive branch, whether it's the president making appointments without, claiming there's recesses and so forth. They've got to assert their constitutional powers.
All right, I want to get you to touch briefly. I know you mentioned it briefly, but Benghazi.
Yeah.
These 12 reiterations of the talking points. As I've been saying all morning, the truth does not require 12 revisions, but there were revisions made, and it now becomes very clear that folks at the White House were directing the CIA to change the talking points. What happens here?
Well, you're exactly right. What happens here is you put a select committee together. You give them, make sure they have broad subpoena power. This isn't the first time there have been investigations. You give them broad subpoena power. The Senate is not going to help because Harry Reid controls it. And you start calling witnesses, and you subpoena individuals for their protection and for fact-gathering information as far up the chain as you can get. I hate to say it, at the White House and at the State Department, because that's what it's going to require. Hillary Clinton testified twice. She wasn't under oath. People say, well, we don't typically put the Secretary of State under oath. That's funny, because when I worked for Ed Meese, he was Chief of Staff. They put him under oath all the time when he was testifying on the Hill. So that isn't unprecedented, but that's what you have to do. You got to work your way up the chain, and if they don't have personnel on their staffs who are capable of doing it, then you hire U.S. attorney, former U.S. attorneys, former assistant U.S. attorneys, and you go ahead and do, like a DeGenev or a Tonsing or somebody like that, or somebody else if you want, and you go ahead and you pursue these things. It depends on how serious they are. Do they want to just keep beating their chest? Say, look at the memos, or do they want to get to the bottom of this?
Well, there's going to be a crack. The reporter's going to get a crack at the president today, because he's got a diplomatic meeting, and traditionally...
You want to know what he's going to say?
He's going to say, what do you think?
Under investigation.
Under investigation.
Some of this information is new to me as well. Let the process work, and then he'll go on 20 minutes about something else.
Yep. Well, you probably have it pegged right. Mark Levin, the great
Thanks,
one.
Mark.
Thank you for joining us.